So we started out last week, and I'm gonna kind of have the same what would you call it, disclaimer, the same disclaimer all through this series, and that's basically, listen, if you're a guest today, or if you're tuning in online and you're a guest. Is it weird that we still use the word tuning in, like we're tuning? Like we don't even do that anymore. We still say it. So anyway, if you're tuning in, that this is a time when our church, members of this church, are aligning our lives in such a way that we can align with the mission of the church, and that we have a mission that we're trying to accomplish some tasks here. And so if you're a guest, what we're just asking is you just engage with the content. That hopefully you take something from this, that it blesses you. But we're not expecting you, if you're not a member here, that you have to be a part of our Stewardship Sunday that's I think 3 weeks away. All right, so that's just my disclaimer. Last week we started, kind of had a key verse. It's kind of it wasn't meant to be the key passage, but I really think it fits for all that we're going to talk about for the next few weeks. And it's in Luke chapter 12, verse 33 through 34. Now, there's a lot of scripture today, and so what I did at the very end of the service, I listed all the scriptures on one slide, and we'll just leave that up for you if you need that, and so you can write all those down. But Luke 12, 33 through 34, it says this: "Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys." And it says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And so we said this was kind of our closing passage, but we said, hey, one of the challenges is, listen, if you're not in a place where you can budget in a giving to your church, that you can sell something. Like a lot of us have some stuff that we don't use, or clothes that we're not wearing, or something that we're not putting to good use. And so it's like, maybe we just get rid of it. And it's kind of an exercise in letting go of some things, because some of us like to keep. Listen, I love books. I have books everywhere. Books I haven't read, books I've kind of read, books I've read, right? And there's still some in boxes. And so it's like, that for me, that's the one. I'm just like, all right, what do I got to sell? What should I let go of a little bit? And so I might sell some books, all right? I might sell some books. But but the other part is that where your treasure is, your heart is. And we just talked about, hey, look at your budget. Does your budget line up with the life that you want, or the heart that you believe you have, right? Because sometimes we could say certain things, or we want to believe this, but our actions prove otherwise, right? And so we said that your heart is where your treasure is. Now, so this week I have the pleasure of trying to make budgeting interesting, all right? That's my goal today. So listen, it's going to be hopefully practical, but listen, my best advice that I can give you right now, and you could literally just zone out for the next 15 minutes, just come back at the end if you want to take this advice. Just sign up for Dave Ramsey's class, Financial Peace University. You can find them all online. You don't even have to go to a different church that you don't know and meet a bunch of strangers anymore, which I encourage that, because I like meeting strangers, but so maybe I'm weird. But you can go do that, and you can just do it online, and it's so good. It's so good, and they cover everything from budgeting to getting out of debt, to investing and saving and retirement and all that stuff. And it's just so good. But here's the thing. I believe that we all want to be generous. I just believe that there's opportunities that come up in life that we can go, man, I wish I could help with that. I wish I could just buy that for that person. I wish I could just be what that person needs financially in their spot right now. And so the problem becomes when we don't have if we don't have an idea of where we are financially, right? If we don't have an idea of budgets and what's going on in our financial life, we come to an opportunity to be generous, and then we go, can I afford that? I'm not sure if I have enough this week, and so we just kind of talk ourselves out and go, man, I hope someone else is able to help. And so part of that is because we don't have it down, or it just comes down, well, I got $15 in my wallet, and it's like, well, hopefully that helps towards whatever it was. And it's like, but what you want Right? We want to be generous. Like we want to be able to just handle something for someone and really just bless them. And so it comes down to some of these issues. Proverbs 21, 5 says, "The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty." Plans of the diligent lead to profit, haste leads to poverty. And so the thing is, like, you have to have a plan, right? And that's all that budgets are. Like we said this last week, that a budget, you have one. If you don't, you might not know what it is, right? But you have one. And so all it is a plan for, hey, this is what's coming in, right? And this is what's going out. And all it is just planning for that. And so, and if you want to win with money, listen, you need to have some idea as to how much is coming in every month and how much is going out, all right? This is very basic budget stuff, right? Like, I'm not going to get into anything crazy. If you want extra stuff, it's going to be Dave Ramsey. But it's just calculating the in and the out. And so if you're new to budgeting, the best way, I love it's free, first off. It's the Every Dollar app. Has anyone used this? Has anyone ever gotten this? No one. This is great. This thing's amazing. All right, it's got a free version. If you got the extra cash, you can get the paid version. It connects with your bank. But all you do with this is it's just on your phone, and it just lines up. It tells you exactly the different things that you need to budget for, and then you can add in these things. But all you do is you just take how much you'll make in a month, right? This is all budgeting, right? You just take how much you'll make in a month. You just put it at the top, and then from there, you just list every single expense, right, that's coming out from there until you get to zero. It's called a zero-based budget, right? You get to zero. It's like, well, I don't want to get to zero. Who wants to get to zero? Like, then we're broke, right? It's like, no. Like, you budget in, right, all of your spending, like your savings, right? You budget in Christmas, like, because Christmas comes every year. I know it moves around. It's in different months and different days it's not. No, right? It's the same day, right? Every year, right? And so are we budgeting for this like in January, or are we waiting till November, right? So it's the same amount of money whether you start saving for it in January or if you start saving for it in November. And so, but it's coming, and so it's not, an emergency. And so you just work your way down until it gets to zero. And so either the Every Dollar app, listen, I'm telling you, it's a great app. But if you're like a spreadsheet person, I have an Excel sheet that is super detailed, and I will gladly erase all of my stuff, and I can email it to anybody that they want to help out. And it's just really simple. I'm not going to get into Excel math. So it functions well, all right? It works well. So, are you with me so far? Good. You're enthusiastic. I love it. So let's begin. I told you I'm going to try to make this interesting. Let's begin with the first line of the budget, all right? And so you probably know where I'm going with this, all right? So it says in Leviticus 23, verse 9, it says, "The Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I am going to give you, and you reap its harvest," right? And you reap its harvest. "Bring to the priest a sheaf of first grain of your harvest." And so listen, if you're Christian world, right? There's this understanding that God is a God of firsts, right? He desires our firsts and our bests, and so part of giving to God is about giving out of the first, and you can go through. That's just one verse in the Old Testament. You can go. There's all kind of verses about giving out of the firsts, giving the fruits of your harvest, right? And so all I'm challenging here today with this part is this. Figure out what you've given in a month on average. If it's cash, if it's whatever, just kind of get a good guess, right? And all I'm challenging you to do is to move it from spare change at the end of the week, Sunday, to giving it on payday. I'm not even challenging you to give more. I'm just challenging you to move when you give. Right, because it's an exercise in giving your first fruits. That's all that is, and so it's a plan, right? And so then we're doing it on purpose, right? It's not a leftover, but it's the saying, hey, here's what I have, here's what I'm offering to you. Now, let's get into the nitty gritty here. And I believe the number one thing holding us back from being generous is debt. It's debt. I honestly believe that. I think that if we would be so much more generous if we weren't giving our money to all other types of people. There's a passage in Proverbs 22, and it's interesting. I want to read the first part because you feel like it doesn't connect. It says this, 22:6. It says, "Start children off on the way they should go, even when they are old, they will not turn from it." Anyone, right? Is that a passage you're familiar with, right? It's like, so what the idea is, it's like, hey, aim your kids, teach your kids how to aim and what to aim at, right? It's like they may not take your advice when they're teenagers, all right, but they may do it down the road. Like, so it's like teaching them how to aim, right? And then the very next verse, this was so interesting. The very next verse after that, because you would think it'd be like, go to church, right? Take your kids to church, do this. These are the things you need to teach. The very next verse after teach your children the way that they should go is this. Verse 7, "The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender." You wouldn't expect those two right next to each other, right? But there's this idea that, listen, debt changes relationships. Debt changes relationships. Listen, if you want someone out of your life, just lend them money, right? I mean, they just disappear, right? Because the relationship changes. It does. Because listen, if you've borrowed money, here's how this happens. Sometimes it's like you lend someone money or you borrow money from someone, and then you see on Facebook they're on vacation, right? And you're like, how are they on vacation when they owe me money, right? Am I making this stuff up? Right? Your dynamic, or even when their name gets brought up in conversation, you go, oh, Carson owes me money. I forgot about that. Right? There's these, like, it's like you're not even if they're nice, and even if the relationship's nice, like you start to not talk about or make excuses like, well, we were on vacation, but we had gift cards and someone else paid for this part, and so you start to get it. You know what I mean? You start to make all these excuses, and it's like that relationship begins to change, and the only reason you see it differently is because they're in debt to you, right? It's the only reason. So here's a rule in our house, and this is a pretty hard and fast rule for us. And it's not even necessarily a biblical model. I'll show you the biblical model next, but this is kind of our route, and it's because we value relationships, and it's if we can't afford to give it, we can't afford to lend it. That's just how we function. Because listen, I don't want unless I want you out of my life. I guess I could lend you money, right? But but we value relationships. We love people, and so it's one of those things where we just go, listen, if I can't afford just to give it to you and say, bless it. If you want to give it back, you are not held to any of this. Just here it is, right? That's kind of the way that we do it, because it just gives you some nice boundaries, right? It's like, and then you don't have to worry about when am I getting it back and when am I. Because if I have to worry about when I'm getting it back, I couldn't afford to lend it to you anyway, right? So there's the issue there. So the biblical model, this is super cool. I actually hadn't seen this. I was kind of familiar with it, but I hadn't seen it laid out like this. Exodus 22:25. It says, if you lend money, right? So if, like it's not you need to, but it's if you lend money. If you lend people among you who is needy, do not treat it like a business deal. Charge no interest. If you take your neighbor's cloak as pledge, return it by sunset, because that cloak is the only covering your neighbor has. What else can they sleep in? When they cry out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. And so the concept, right, behind lending money in the Old Testament was it was about bringing people out of poverty. Right, the idea was that it was about a step up for someone, and so that's kind of a way that you can use to outline how you're going to, if you're going to lend money, how you're going to do it. It's like, is this helping someone step up, right? Or is this about the new car or the new lease or the co-signing because they want the nicer thing, right? That's not what this is talking about. This is about, and then it's also, he says, he didn't take collateral. Right? It was like the collaterals, that was a short-term thing. It's like we're not taking from you. right? Because first off, if you're lending money that you can afford to lend, right? It's like, I can afford to never get this back. And so I'm not taking something from you as well, because I'm trying to help you. And so listen, I just think, man, God gets such a bad rap in the Old Testament, but there's so much of this like compassion for the poor, compassion for those that are struggling. And so that's the type of people we ought to be. So if we are going to lend, make sure you can afford to lose it and that it's helping someone step up in their space. Now let me before I keep going, let me just say this real quick. There's exceptions to every rule, right? I mean, there's exceptions to every type of rule, and you always run into them, but it's good to have a baseline for how you function. And then you can kind of offshoot if you need to, but to have a nice baseline of here's how we function as a home, here's how we function as a family. Financially, this is what we do and how we operate, and we can move on from there. So the next thing is, if you're broke, right, figure out a way to stop using payday lenders, cash advances, and lottery tickets, right? Because listen, $25 a week, right? $25 a week in a mutual fund for 20 years is $150,000, right? At roughly 10% interest, which is over 20 years is definitely doable. How many people that you know that are buying lottery tickets every week have $150,000 in the bank? I mean, it's slim, right? The lottery is a literal tax. I'm not saying I've never played and I don't play. Like especially when it gets up to, $2 billion? Is that like, listen, it makes you kind of think, right? But it's a literal tax on the poor because, listen, the majority of people who buy lottery tickets are in poor neighborhoods and are under the poverty line, right? And so you get up to $2 billion, and then who gets half of it? The government, right? Who paid for most of it? Broke people. And then one person gets the other half. That's a literal tax on the poor. Literally, right? The government's just crushing on this one. And then they make you feel good about it. Like, you're like, oh, well. But listen, I get the idea of needing hope when you're struggling. And so I understand the reason behind it, but understanding that if you just put it away and you just stack it a little bit, because 25, I think that's a low number for some folks that are spending money on the lottery. Because I've seen people walk out, it's just like, I'll get 16 at 7, and I'll take 30 at number 5, and 17 on the Powerball. It's like you just dropped like a really nice steak dinner. I think of everything in food. I was like, that's a really nice steak dinner. But the lottery is a literal tax on the poor. But debt is it's like walking around with chains on. It's like you want to be able to do some things, but like you're so weighed down, like that you have to, you can't live maybe the way that you want to live because of the weight of debt that's on you. And listen, this is my frustration with student loans, right? I mean, we're just, I don't know if, when I went to school, when I was in high school, middle school, they told me, they're like, you have got to get student loans, you have got to go to college, listen, college is great, it has worked out very well for me, but there's how many folks out there that are getting like degrees in left-handed puppetry, right? It's like, for like $1 million, $100,000 a year, and it's like, well, but you went to you had a good time for 4 years, right? And now if anyone needs a left-handed puppet, you're the guy, right? You leave college, and you have like 6 months to figure it all out before they start asking for their money back. And it's like, man, the debt that is weighing down, like you can't take a risk, like, right? You can't go find a company that you think is doing an amazing thing and just intern for them so you can learn the business and learn these ins and outs. Like, no, you've got to go make $20 an hour, right? So that you can just pay your student loans. Right, it's a weight that we put on ourselves that doesn't allow us to do some of the things that we did. And so when I decided to go to seminary, right? So we started seminary in the fall, and I say we because the whole house is going through it. All right. so we were all going to seminary, and one of the things was, how am I going to work and go to school, right? And so we literally spent all summer pretending like we made a lot less money, right? And just dumping everything that we could on this debt, because it was, and luckily we didn't have a lot stacked up that kept me from being able to go down to 2 days a week of work, and so but it's a freedom, right? It's like, if I had all of that debt that I used to have, that we had spent the last couple years paying down and paying off, if we had that, I just couldn't do it. And it's the reason why I hadn't done it in the past. It's like I've always wanted to go to seminary, right? It was like, I still have student loans that I'm paying off from my undergrad, right? But we have such a blessing in the Methodist Church that they were able to cover my tuition, right, for seminary, which is just an amazing thing. But also, we had to work hard to pay off debt, to take the chains off, so that we can do the things that we really feel called to do. And I just think there's so many young people that are leaving college that have dreams and want to do amazing things, but they've got to go work at Starbucks to pay the bill. And it's like, you're cut yourself short. And so it's like, do everything you can to figure out how to get out of college. Like teenagers, if you're listening to me, everything you can to get out of college debt-free if you want to go, right? So that's my what? Yeah. There's ways to do it. Talk to somebody. Don't spend $100,000 on a 4-year party. That's really my only thing. So what's the first rule in getting out of debt? Stop going into more debt, right? That's the first rule of getting out of debt, is to stop using the credit cards. And this was one of my issues and I'll get off my soapbox at some point. One of my issues with the student loan forgiveness, and wherever side you're on it, it doesn't bother me. I can understand both sides. My frustration was that while we were going to pay off loans, we were still issuing them, right? It was that like, you can't you can't fix a problem that you're continuing to create, all right? And so before we can get out of debt, we've got to figure out how to stop spending ourselves into debt, right? And so, and listen, this is not easy. How many credit card offers do you get? I don't know if you ever did the Financial Peace University class, the Dave Ramsey class. They asked you every week when you met to bring in all of your credit card offers that came in the mail that week, and they save them. And they just get a pile. There's like 12 couples in this thing, and there's just a stack of. Listen, it's not free to send those out, right? That's not free. Like, they're sending those out because they think they're going to make money, right? And so that's always constantly going on. But listen, banks, they are in it because they're winning, right? I mean, there's a reason the tallest building in Cleveland has what at the top? A bank sign, right? Because they're winning. Right? It's like Vegas, right? It's like Vegas is there because Vegas wins, all right? You don't expect to win, right? And so, like, you get tied up in the points thing, the credit card points. You're like, I'm going to do this, and then with my points, you miss one payment, right? Or you carry a balance. It's like it unequals all of your points, right? It's like one time. It's like the only reason they're giving you points is because the majority of people either don't use them or end up carrying a balance and spend way more in interest than they do on points. You're not going to become a millionaire by points, right? It's like, that's all right. The whole sermon is a soapbox. You'll be all right. We're going to be on it the whole time. Listen, so my bank this just happened like 6 months ago. I log into my bank, right? And so it goes checking account, savings account. Every time I log in, checking account, savings account. 6 months ago, I log in. There's a third account. But what? And it's got money in it. I go, wait, what? It just goes, in case you need it, here's $250. Just put it back within 2 days that you take it. I'm like, oh, nice. So it's just sitting there. Like, they're begging you. Banks are begging you to borrow money. Not because they like you, right? Because they like money, and they know that when you borrow it, they get more of it. Like, it's that simple. So, all right, next. Once you've stopped going into debt, right? So the next thing is to start an emergency fund, right? So you start an emergency fund, and this basically becomes your new credit card, right? But it's only for emergencies, right? It's not for eating, right? It's not for dining out, right? It's not for Christmas because Christmas is an emergency because Christmas comes the same time every year, right? It's like, and you should have a car fund. If your car breaks down, like, that's an emergency, or a water tank goes out, like that's an emergency. And so you have now your own personal credit card, and you treat it that way. You pay it back immediately after you use it, and you're paying yourself money. It's so much better than paying other people money, right? So you're just paying yourself. So here's your emergency card, your emergency fund, and that's, listen, just get it up to maybe $1,000 before you move on to the next place. $1,000, that gives you a nice little breathing room. Something happens, you can handle that. And here's the thing that we do with ours. We put it somewhere where it's really hard to get to, okay? So like mine doesn't have a bank card. It doesn't have actually it's in a Wesleyan bank account. Well, go Wesley, right? There's no card, there's no checkbook, there's no physical location anywhere around here. I'd have to drive to, I think, Indiana, right, to get it, right? So I can call. Now I have to make a phone call, but it takes a day at least to get the money out of the account, right? So I can't use it on just like splurging. Like, I really like those pants, like it's an emergency amount of pants. It's like, it's not, right? Just go to Savers, you'll be fine. All right, so that's step one, right? Build up that emergency fund. Step two, wow, I'm so behind on time. Debt snowball, right? Debt snowball is basically just listing all of your debts, smallest to largest, and you're paying off the lowest balance first. The lowest balance first. I know you're like, shouldn't you pay off the highest interest first? It's like, listen, math didn't get you in debt, right? So it's like, we just need a win. Like, you weren't doing math like when you were like, I need all this stuff on a credit card. So like, yeah, technically you want to pay off interest first, but it's way better to get that snowball big, and you can start paying off all these other things. And then the last part of this is, if you're out of debt and you're in a place where you can be, or just in your own circumstance, you believe you're in a place financially you can be generous. There's this passage I love in Leviticus 23. It says, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave them for the poor and for the foreigner residing among you. I am the Lord your God. And so it's just this idea that when you're in your harvest, when you're reaping your harvest, that they're like, oh, I left something, I missed that. It's like, no, just leave it. Leave it. Like, go, you don't let someone else come through and get it. And so it's like, in our own lives, creating space in our budgets for blessing others, right? It's that simple. And I used to trick myself into it, because you ever have to trick yourself to do things? So I would round my budget down and my income up. The other way. I'd round my income down and my bills up, so that there would be like some money left at the end. And that was just how I tricked myself into having a little bit extra, just to kind of bless some people. So I'm going to close, all right? Matthew 25. Why are we doing this? Right? We kind of talked about why are we covering budgets, and why are we covering, are these Bible things? Are these, there's a passage that, I don't know if you're familiar with the parable of the talents, the parable of talents. So it's about kind of eschatology, the end of time, or the end of or the return of Christ, that Jesus is telling these parables, and he says this. To one I gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. And then he went on his journey, right? So the master gives his servants some stuff to take care of. And I love that he says in accordance with their ability, right? So it's like, verse 16 says, the man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more bags. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more, but the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. So eventually the master comes back, right? And he wants a count of his money. And the first one comes, and he doubled it. The second one comes, and he doubled his, right? So it's like, these guys are good. And then in verse 24, it says, then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here it is. Here is what belongs to you. And his master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. You knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. You see, there's an expectation on us. There's an expectation on us that we have been given something in a response, and we're to handle it in a responsible manner, right? It's like none of this is mine, right? That's what the psalm, what David wrote, right? It's like the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it, like everything is God's. And we're not here that long, but we've been given assets to be responsible for in according to what we can manage. So giving credit card companies, furniture stores, car loan notes, banks our money because we wanted the extra feature, we wanted it now, or because we're undisciplined, is probably worse than burying it in the ground. So, and here's the whole kind of gist. Here's what I believe. A church that is out of debt and filled with people who are out of debt is primed to bless everyone in their path. And that's just what I want for this church. I just want this church to be able to be a place where it's just like, man, there's just people blessing everybody they see in any way that they can. They're ready to help. They're prepared to help, right? They're budgeted. They have a plan, right? That's the type of church that I think we're called to be. So I just thank you, church. God bless.
Let's stand.